Welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right into one of the absolute most profound spiritual protocols you'll find anywhere in the ancient texts. We are tracking the ultimate journey from just agonizing rock-bottom despair all the way to absolute joy exactly as it's mapped out for us in Psalm 113. We're going to really explore the raw, totally unfiltered honesty of covenant prayer. And by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how to navigate those brutal periods in life when heaven just seems completely silent. So let's dive right in.
Have you ever felt entirely forgotten by your Creator? Honestly, it's a super heavy thought, right? The text we're analyzing today takes a massive step away from the usual talk about societal decay or the chaos out in the world, and it plunges us straight into this hyper-personal wrestling match deep within the hidden chambers of the soul. We're talking about that very specific agonizing spiritual desert when it genuinely feels as though Yahweh has just intentionally turned his face away from you.
And this is exactly what that despair sounds like. In Psalm 13, verses 1 and 2, it literally erupts with this relentless, staccato burst of spiritual agony. 4 distinct times, David hurls the exact same question straight at the bench of heaven. How long, O Yahweh? Now this isn't just a mild complaint, no way. This is the raw language of a covenant partner who has hit the absolute boundary line of human endurance.
Which brings us to part 1, the descent, the eclipse of the divine countenance.
So to truly understand why this is so painful, we kind of need to look at what's actually happening under the hood spiritually. We're dealing with the terrifying concept of the Creator intentionally turning his face away from a believer who is actually striving to walk uprightly. Specifically, we're talking about the Hebrew concept of Hester Panim, the hiding of the divine face. If you know the framework of the Torah, specifically looking at Deuteronomy 31:17, you know this is the ultimate covenant nightmare. Yahweh warned Israel point blank that a lifestyle of lawlessness would trigger the withdrawal of his active favor, his protection, and his intimacy. But here's the deep mystery driving David absolutely crazy. He is trying so hard to walk uprightly, yet he's still feeling that terrifying chill of the hidden face.
Moving on to part 2, the trap, the echo chamber of self-counsel. You see, when Elohim is silent, we all tend to default to this incredibly dangerous coping mechanism. Think about the contrast here. When you stop hearing the unshakable words of the Torah, what fills the void? You start listening exclusively to your own anxious, spiraling internal monologues. Your soul basically turns into this toxic echo chamber of despair. You literally start taking counsel in your own soul, having sorrow in your heart daily. You're running through every possible worst-case scenario, frantically plotting all these human strategies that, let's be honest, simply cannot save you. And all the while, the adversary is just growing increasingly arrogant. It is a totally vicious cycle.
So, part 3. The cry for light, petition for divine enlightenment.
How on earth do we break out of that echo chamber? Well, we have to forcefully shift our focus. David actually breaks right out of his own self-counsel and decides to address his Creator directly using these deeply intimate covenant terms. He says, "Consider and hear me, O Yahweh my Elohim." And then he drops this incredibly specific, urgent, almost medical spiritual request. "Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death." He knows, for sure, that without immediate divine intervention, total collapse is right at his door.
The exact phrase he uses there is Hera inai, meaning enlighten my eyes. Now, in biblical idiom, when someone is terminally ill or just completely broken by grief, their eyes become dim. They lose that vital spark of life. So to enlighten the eyes is to inject supernatural strength, revelation, and vitality right back into a dying, exhausted frame. Our sources connect this brilliantly back to 1 Samuel 14:27. You might remember the story where Jonathan was completely and utterly exhausted after a brutal battle. The scripture says the moment he ate just a single drop of honey, his countenance beamed. Literally, his eyes were enlightened. That is the exact spiritual revitalization David is crying out for here. But here's the thing. David isn't just asking for his own sake. He brings this brilliant secondary argument to the table, and it's entirely focused on protecting the honor of the covenant itself. He essentially says, look, if a totally dedicated believer is just utterly destroyed, the wicked aren't just going to mock that believer. They're going to mock the Torah itself. They'll argue that serving Yahweh is completely useless. This aligns so perfectly with Moses' intercessory strategy back in Numbers 14, where he argued that Yahweh must preserve Israel so the adversary can't claim any sort of victory. He's directly appealing to the grand reputation of the Creator.
And then, boom, we hit the wall. Just let that sink in for a second. This is a massive adversarial contrast marker.
It's literally a wake-up call designed to completely shatter all that suffocating tension that just built up in those previous verses.
Which leads us to part 4, the great pivot, shifting the atmosphere.
The entire atmosphere of this psalm violently shifts right here. We are suddenly moving to an unshakable anchor that exists completely outside of our temporary, fluctuating human feelings. The Hebrew word used here is va'ani. It literally means "but I." It's a structural word, and it's used to forcefully pivot our focus away from that silent void, away from the mocking enemy, away from our exhausted soul, and snap it directly onto covenant truth. This single, powerful linguistic shift is the exact thing that breaks the anxious echo chamber we were talking about earlier. It's like he's saying, let the silence be heavy, let my soul be tired. Actually, scratch that. Even if my soul is completely drained. Va'ani. But I have a completely different foundation.
And what exactly is that foundation? David boldly declares, "But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation." The absolutely crucial point here is the timeline. Look at the temporal sequence David is operating in. This is a profound display of emunah, of faithfulness. His heart is actively rejoicing before any of his physical circumstances have actually changed. He hasn't received a single sign that his problems are solved, yet he's already throwing a victory celebration.
How can he possibly do that? Because he consciously anchors his trust in chesed. Chesed is Yahweh's loyal, unfailing, historical covenant love. David makes the deliberate choice to ground his faith not in his current emotional state, which, let's face it, is fleeting and completely exhausted, but in the proven, historical, unalterable character of Yahweh.
Furthermore, he rejoices in Yahshua, meaning salvation. This is a promised deliverance from Elohim that is so incredibly secure, you can literally take it to the bank as a finished reality in the present moment. Relying on Yahshua is what allows any believer to look back over the macro ledger of their entire life and sing praises for all his bountiful dealings, even when they are currently freezing in the temporary winter of Yahweh's silence. A lifetime of extraordinary goodness simply cannot be erased by a difficult season.
Now, part 5. The ultimate example, the path of Messiah Yeshua. You see, this ancient U-shaped pattern, going deep down into hiddenness, and then rising up into triumph, it connects directly to the ultimate messianic fulfillment. We see this exact structural movement perfectly, and I mean perfectly, fulfilled in Messiah Yahshua. When he hung upon the execution stake, he experienced the absolute apex of Hester Panim, the ultimate hiding of the Father's face. He even cried out, quoting Psalm 22, my El, why have you forsaken me?" which perfectly mirrors that agonizing cry of Psalm 13 we just read. Yet he did not succumb to the sleep of eternal death. He trusted completely in the Father's chesed. And on the third day, just as 1 Peter 1:21 outlines for us, Yahweh enlightened his eyes, raising him into incorruptible life and total absolute victory.
So, bringing it all together in part 6, the protocol, how to pivot in the dark.
Okay, so what do we actually do with this dense theological breakdown? We translate it into a modern, highly practical survival guide. If you are out there navigating unanswered prayers right now, here are 3 actionable steps clearly mapped out for you to help you pivot in the dark. Number 1, take your raw complaints directly to the judge of heaven. Seriously, he is not threatened by your questions or your pain. Number 2, stop counseling your own soul. You have to break that echo chamber and instead ask him to have your eyes enlightened with his truth. And number 3, make a deliberate, conscious choice to shift your eyes off the immediate problem, anchor onto his historical chesed, and look to his definitive Yeshua. Rest assured, your current trial has a predefined boundary line. It will not last forever.
I want to leave you with this thought today. When the face of your Creator seems completely hidden, when the days turn into weeks of desperately unanswered prayer, what will you choose to anchor your soul to in the dark? Remember, his face will not be hidden forever. Trust in that unfailing love, look forward to that salvation, and prepare yourself to sing. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep seeking the truth, and I'll catch you next time.